I just got a new book. I open it up and here's the first few lines. This morning, I tried to donate my kidney. This afternoon, the transplant team told me I can't. I've got cancer. Those are the opening lines to this new book called Living: Inspirations from a Father with Cancer by Jeff Stewart. And if that name Jeff Stewart rings a bell, you're probably a longtime Jeopardy fan. Jeff was on Jeopardy 9 times. He won the college tournament. He placed second in the Tournament of Champions. He is a molecular biologist. He advises pharma companies. And today, Jeff Stewart's going to come on to the show and talk about his cancer journey, writing his book, and all of the interesting twists and turns that we learn when we're diagnosed with cancer. So let me roll the intro and get right into it. If you heard the words, "you've got cancer," you understand the overwhelming flood of fear and uncertainty that follows that sentence. I get it. I was there too, diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer with an 11% shot of survival. But 11 isn't 0, and here I am living my best encore. My name is Melanie Holscher, author of Becoming Ovary Jones: How to Fight Cancer Without Losing Your Mind, and the host of the Ovary Jones Show, where we talk about hope, lessons learned, and the blessings hidden in the storms of life. Tune in and share with a friend, because nobody should fight cancer alone. Jeff Stewart, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Melanie. I really appreciate the chance to talk to other patients and to caregivers. It's asking a lot to make cancer worth it, if you know what I mean, but I try my utmost.
Absolutely. No, I get it. We all get it. And so just so you know, you're not going to be penalized if you don't respond in the form of a question on my show.
I'm kind of disappointed because that's my comfort zone.
Well, my goal is to always get people out of their comfort zone. That's what I do for a living. So sorry, I'm going to have to challenge you on that one. So, wow, Jeopardy champion. You won a little bit of ka-ching and a car, and you were quasi-famous for a while. What was that like?
It's a weird feeling being noticed. So, I mean, I grew up not expecting to be noticed particularly, but as you walk around in New York or London or Amsterdam or on the plane going coast to coast and people calling out, "Are you Jeff?" That's an odd feeling. That is an odd feeling. It's kind of fun, but it is a strange feeling. You feel like you're on display all the time. So it was just enough fame for me to enjoy it, and just enough fame for me to realize how difficult it could be also. So I'm actually kind of glad I got both sides of it. In Jeopardy, when I was on, it was over 30 years ago. Man, the time flies. It was 29 years ago. And so the fame has died down, but at the time, of course, I grew up we got 3 of the networks clearly at our house. There were 5 channels that you could get, sort of, and everybody watched.
Now that's pretty exciting. And then, roll the clock forward, you were really jumping through hoops trying to donate a kidney. So I want to talk a little bit about that. When I read those first lines in your book, I'm like, wow, that's an incredible way to find out that you have cancer. But you also talk about all the hoops that you jumped through, the massive effort that you made to try to get yourself in a position where you could donate a kidney. And I'm just curious, where did that passion come from, that commitment to make all of that happen?
I do projects for pharma companies, and in doing so, I really do run into what patients' lives are like, which are sometimes pretty grim. And the end-stage renal disease patients, those patients who are on dialysis, and they need to have a kidney, and a kidney could save their life. And it's right there. People are walking right past them all day long, millions of them, that have 2 kidneys. And we don't need 2 kidneys. We don't. When that's the other thing you find out, is that the risk is zero to donate a kidney. And I say zero, I mean zero. The people that donate their kidneys actually live a little bit longer than those people that don't donate their kidneys. If you have one kidney out, the other kidney grows like a starfish, and takes over the functions of the other one. Normally, when you have a kidney problem, you have two kidney problems, not a kidney problem anyway. So it's not like you're taking a large risk of saying, well, I maybe needed that kidney later on. None of those things is really true. So once you know those things, then it just seemed like the right thing to do. And then COVID came, and COVID really hurt kidney patients in particular. It killed them at something like 4 times the rate of other patients. And so it was the right time to push. I mean, I tried earlier, but I had gastric bypass before. It was difficult to get anybody to, take me seriously as a donation patient. I had to lose a heck of a lot of weight. Thank you, Ozempic. Eventually got me there. I was able then to go in, and thank goodness I did, because my cancers have no symptoms. I still have never had a cancer symptom. I don't. And didn't. The ones that should have been symptomatic, the ones, the deadly one in my stomach, well, that was the bypass part of my stomach. So the good part of that is that when they removed my stomach's already been removed. It just was kind of sitting there. It was just cancerous. And so they took it out, but there was nothing to see. There was nothing to feel. There was nothing to block. It was bypassed. And so if I had not tried to donate a kidney, it would have been lethal, and like 100% lethal. So it's very, very fortunate.
Yes. So your passion to share your spare ended up saving your life. That is pretty incredible. And I want to, not everybody realizes this, but not only did they find one cancer, they found 2. Talk about that. What was that like, hearing that? And did you find that out right away, or did that take some time to figure out that there was 2 there?
No, I found out right away that there were 2 cancers. What I didn't find out was how deadly the cancers were. At first, we thought, okay, 2 tumors, that's bad. But both of them are really curable, and even if they're curable probably by surgery, and even if you have to get chemo, they're targeted chemotherapy because we know the kind of tumor it is. These ones are pretty safe tumors. Really, at that point, 2 cancers. What I was mostly worried about were my kids. I have 7 kids, so I didn't want it to have been a genetic disease that I was going to pass on to them. So that was my largest anxiety at the time, was not, are these cancers really bad for me, but are they really bad for someone else? Because I thought I'd be really super curable at that point. I mean, we say that getting diagnosed early for these kind of cancers saved my life. It probably saved my life, but not necessarily. By probably, it's about 50-50. I still am at a kind of a 50% risk stage. If I survive the next year with no progression of the cancer, then that will reveal that I have already been cured by my treatments that I have. And if not, then it is, as I said kind of before, 100% lethal. So that I sit in this kind of weird space of risk on something like that. So I don't want to. It's at least the diagnosis gave me time. It gave me time, Melanie, to be able to write and think what I wanted to do if I were to be dying rapidly. Because that's the other part about this particular cancer, is that it's, yes, 100% lethal if it spreads kind of broadly, this particular kind of stomach cancer that I have. It's also pretty rapid. Average time to death from discovering that it's spread. Maybe I have a little bit more than this if it does spread and we discover it then, but it's like 5 months. It's not much. So you really do have to have your ducks in a row. One of the things I really wanted to get in a row was those 7 kids, and making sure that they weren't just left with things unsaid. And so I tried to think, well, what would I absolutely have to have them know and really want them to know, individually and as a group, and put that down, get that down on paper. And that was the start of why I thought I should write a book.
Yeah, it is absolutely beautiful. I have read it cover to cover, and it is living inspiration from a father with cancer. And so what it is it's your story, But woven into the pages are all kinds of tips and advice, fatherly advice that you're giving to your kids. And it's such a beautiful read. But I really want to kind of go back to what a typical day in the life of Jeff Stewart post the Jeopardy set was all about, because you were actually trying to figure out the scientific and commercial ramifications or potential for cancer drugs. And you were working with different pharma companies, from what I understand. I've talked to a lot of healthcare professionals that ended up being diagnosed themselves, and it's a little bit of a different experience because you know a whole lot about it, whereas when I went through it, I didn't know anything about it, and I think in my case, ignorance was bliss. So tell me exactly what you do for a living and how that impacted your journey.
So with cancer specifically, I used to work at a cancer lab. I have a molecular biology advanced degree. That is work I did. That is not exactly what I do now. What I do now is advise pharma companies. And if you think of a pharma company and you know the name of it, I probably have advised them. I've advised 85 over 300 projects over the last 17 years of doing this kind of work. And the advice I would give is often, which company should you buy? Which product in development is good, and how good is it? And how much money will it make if it works? How likely is it to make that? And therefore, what should you pay for it if you're one company buying another company or selling to another company? And so to do that, Melanie, my Thursday was to pick up, go online, read all the clinical trial data I could about a company that was available publicly or with certain private subscriptions, understand the science of it, talk to a lot of oncologists. I've talked to so many oncologists over the years, just to try to understand, okay, well, how do you actually treat patients? How do you make decisions? What does insurance do to you that you dislike? How do you get over that? It just work through every step of the process. So I'm able then to tell my pharma clients, this is a good drug to buy for you. This is a bad drug to buy for you. This is a drug that if you're selling it, which, even the largest companies sometimes sell their drugs. It's like I don't know, they think of them as pro sports players or something like that. They're switching them around. They're drafting different ones. And, I'm acting like their scout, so to speak, and telling them, you really do need to sell this one out to this other company because they can do a better job with it than you can in this stage. And so that's what I did. That's what I do.
Yes. So that sounds like you know a thing or two about pharmacology, and you've talked to a lot of oncologists over the years. Do you think that information, that knowledge that you have, was that helpful in your journey, or did you wish that you didn't know quite so much?
I think many of us, definitely helpful. So, and I'll give you an example of why it's helpful. I'll give you an example of why it's not that helpful. The not helpful is where you think you know something, but you don't really know it. And so you're stupid, but you don't know you're stupid. You think you're smart about something, and so you get something wrong for quite a while. That does happen. More often, it's like, I don't know if you had the experience growing up of, taking vocab tests in high school or something like that. You're a writer. You probably found the vocab test to be pretty easy. And the reason you found it easy is because it wasn't the first time you'd come across the words. You had read the words maybe 10 years before. Some of your classmates hadn't. And so the vocab to them was 20 or 30 words they had never heard before. Maybe they heard two. And it was a really challenging test. But for you, you had heard all but two. And so those two, you had to learn two things. Anybody can learn two words, even if they're words you'd never ever heard before. That's what going into cancer is like for me versus someone who doesn't know any of the words. You can get a cancer, and I'm sure the patients or caregivers like listening to this, you're nodding your head like you walked in and you hear that I have, stage 2 adenocarcinoma. Don't worry, we're going to treat it with neoadjuvant therapy. Your mind is spinning because you don't even know word one, or you kind of know what it means. I do have those moments in there. More of those moments after chemo because it messes with your brain. But I'm usually listening along, and then I realize that there's one word I don't understand in one of the sentences because I haven't come across it before. And I can stop them and say, okay, I don't quite know what you mean when you say it's an intestinal tumor. I know what intestinal means, but you use it in a weird way. Does it really mean in my intestine? Oh no, it's not intestinal. It's actually it could be in your stomach, but not in your stomach. And it's a type of tumor. Like, oh, okay, I get it. And you use the word diffuse. I know what diffuse kind of means. I know what the letters C and T are. They're letters in English. But what is a CT scan? I'm able to stop people because I don't have to stop them every sentence. That is a gift. That is a gift, Melanie. And I'm so thankful that I've been given that gift by just the luck of the kind of work that I do. I guess it's, if you've worked on cars a lot in your life and then suddenly you had something wrong with even an electric car, you know some of the things that are going into it, and some of the things are different, and you can just focus on those things that are very different. That's what it's like for me.
Well, it sounds like you knew a lot going into it and you learned a lot as well. And one of the things that you said on page 67, actually, is survival stats are the light from old stars. Treatments have improved. The staging numbers are probably scarier than my reality. And I love that. I didn't know I only had an 11% shot at survival back then. I didn't know I was stage 4 metastasis. I didn't know any of that. And my doctor was like, stay off the internet. There's so much misinformation out there. Just stay off the internet. And everything happened for me so quickly that I actually abided by her wishes and stayed off of the internet. So in my case, ignorance really was bliss, but I really loved what you said about survival stats are the light from old stars. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the common currency of survival numbers is 5-year survival. But if you think about it, what's happened in the last 5 years? With my cancer, not only have a lot of treatments moved along so they're more affordable or they're just treated differently, we just now have immunotherapies that are being used in at least in late stage clinical trials, if not, I think they either just were approved or are about to be approved for gastric cancer. None of the 5-year survival numbers could possibly have had current treatments in them. They just don't. They have treatments from at least 5 years ago, probably 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, or 10 years ago. So it's like looking back in time as you look deep in the universe. You're seeing the past. And things are probably better now than they were in the past. So it's good advice to stay off the internet for the misinformation and disinformation that your oncologist was concerned about. That's worse now, probably, even than when you had your that excellent advice. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. But on top of that, the good information, quote unquote good information, comes with a lot of caveats. You have to know a little bit more so that it doesn't just completely frighten you. I'll give you one example that I just stopped my heart at one point. I don't mean literally stop my heart, but it was not a good day, Melanie. I had been having some back pain. So this is after treatment is done. I'm so far clear on CT scans at this point. So this is over the summer. And I was having back pain, pretty severe back pain. And back pain, cancer, those things can kind of go together. I mean, you can have metastatic tumors that are impinging on your nerves. I have some nerve damage from my my chemotherapy. I mean, there are reasons to be concerned about pain and cancer. So they ordered an out-of-cycle CT scan for my brain. I opened up, so I'm sitting have it early in the day. It comes up on my chart by 8 o'clock in the evening. So they're pretty fast at turning things around. I don't have an oncologist there. No oncologist is calling me to say, hey, you let me talk you through this. I go in and open up my records because you can. Patients can instantly. So I do. I open it up. The very first line I read, indication, brain metastases. Like, I'm just like looking at my wife and going, "Oh, Jen, I am so sorry," because I'm just looking at this. This is lethal. I mean, lethal and wow. But then I read a little bit longer. Indication does not mean indication. It doesn't mean like what you think or what I think. On those particular CT scans and the way that they say it, it is what they're worried about. It's why they ordered it. It's the question, not the answer. You scan down to the bottom and they get to like impression, which you'd think indication would be more important than impression, but no, impression, no brain metastases. So at least at that point, I was totally clear and safe. But for a bit there, because, I didn't know. I've not worked in that, and gosh, I mean, I scared myself, at least only for 30 seconds, but I scared myself pretty bad, Melanie.
That sounds terrifying. So if they would have just put that in the form of a question, that would have been so much better, right?
Correct.
So you talk about your oncologist, and I have to tell you, I love my oncology team. I love your oncologist's name. Best name ever for an oncologist. What's the name of your oncologist? How'd you find her?
My oncologist is Dr. Hope Uranus. I called her Dr. Hope in the book because it's just easier to remember. An oncologist named Hope. That is lovely, isn't it? Yeah. I found her by I was at Duke to get my transplant. It is. I mean, she said afterwards she's never even heard of somebody being discovered upon trying to donate. So it made me, low-key famous within their system as the person who was discovered, to have tumors by transplanting. And so they moved me, I think. Maybe they're all fantastic. She is not only fantastic. I called around to Sloan Kettering and other places that are, number 1, 2, 3 kind of places. People I know, people where I have connections with them. And they were like, oh, you're being treated by her? Oh yeah, she's fantastic. Yeah, and they knew about her. So that I did get an excellent oncologist. But in honesty, Melanie, the oncologists that I interview, when I interview doctors, like the pediatricians are all like cowboys and cowgirls. They're all like shoot from the hip, trying all sorts of things off label because nothing is approved for kids, and so they'll try anything. And you talk to the surgeons, and they're kind of like the school jocks, but the oncologists, they're like the school nerds, and the radiation oncologists, they're like the school AV club. They know what they're talking about. In general, oncology is it's the place that really attracts the people who are super, super smart. They're on top of the science. They're quite, they're just quite involved with it. It's not going to be everybody's oncologist. I know individual results may vary, but in general, of the doctors I've talked to, they're fantastic.
I agree. Like I said, my oncology team is second to none. I mean, they're amazing. As a matter of fact, Pittsburgh's very well known for their medical community. So I was very confident, even though I didn't have a lot of time to pick, oncologists. So I never actually had the opportunity to screen any or get a second opinion. Everything was done very, very quickly for me because I did have, like you were talking about, a tumor. My tumor was crushing my spinal column. And so I was feeling like I was being electrocuted every single night. And they needed to radiate immediately to get that off of my spinal column so that I didn't become paralyzed. So I didn't have time to get second and third opinions. What is your advice when people are choosing an oncology team? What do you look for, and how do you find the team that's going to be best for you?
That's a hard one. I'll tell you what I did, but I don't know how easy this is to do. It's just what I did. I would ask questions and see how responsive they were actually to thinking about whether or not whether they would actually think through it and not be quite so dismissive necessarily. I mean, I know that they have to deal with a lot of people that have very basic questions, but sometimes you do actually have to kind of stop and think. And I found both my radiation oncologist and my medical oncologist, Dr. Hope, to be people that took the time to stop, think, and answer in ways that, they feel like the good teacher at school that teaches you. I guess we've all been there where, there's the good librarian who really wants you to learn, and there's the nasty assistant librarian who really would just rather be with the books, and the library would be great if it just worked for these kids. If you get that vibe, I would tend to avoid. Not because, maybe they're great, but in my experience, those are the people that tend to find it difficult to learn from their mistakes. And I don't want that to happen with me. I'd rather have somebody who's a little bit more flexible in learning from their own mistakes, is willing to teach. Now, you don't have to go to your oncologist to have them teach you about oncology. You don't have to. I kind of want to know from my plumber what they're doing, and the same thing with my with the person that fixes my car. But there are some points where some things that people work on, I'm just like, well, you just take care of it, and that's your job, and you don't need to pay me to teach me. But I kind of like it, so I do tend to use that as a screen also. And if that's what you like, you can insist on that, and just go to someone else.
I believe that we have to be the CEO of our healthcare, our bodies. We pick our teams, and we have to be involved in that because we're going to experience the ramifications of those decisions, right? So, and you were talking about that librarian. I am a sales coach, leadership coach. So I work with leaders all of the time. And there are some leaders, like your librarian, that, or the tech, that will say, oh, this leadership thing would be a lot easier if it wasn't for the people, right? But it's the people that we're serving. So I really do think that it's important to choose the team and then advocate for your own life, really. So I love that. You give a lot of really great technical explanations to chemo and radiology, and I actually learned some things. I've gone through those. I was right there with you, in the room, because as you described it and everything, I'm like, yeah, I remember that, and I remember that. But you do a really great job of explaining some of these things, and in ways that is really easy to understand, and you offer some really great advice. So one of the things that you suggest is to name your trauma, and you talked a little bit about World War II Holocaust survivors and the data that actually shows that talking about their experience really helped. Did you find talking helpful as you wrestled with the uncertainty of your diagnosis?
I suppose I must have, Melanie, in terms of just keeping it from traumatizing me. That study done of Holocaust survivors, those that had never spoken about their trauma, but then spoke about it for the first time in interviews, those that told the worst, the most awful things, felt the best later on, and went to the doctor less often than those that didn't say as awful things. Like it really did help them. I take that seriously, and so maybe that did. I'm sure that it did, based on the evidence. But what I did notice, and what I guess my focus was at the time, was I didn't have to write the book all at once. I was typing as I went and posting things on social media and getting feedback from people who said, this helped me understand my mother's cancer. She never knew what to say. She died when I was young. She didn't understand what was going on. My grandmother never talked about it. She just never wanted to talk about it. My grandfather just didn't know how to talk about it with me, and it was kind of a void. And this may help me to understand, even if it was different cancer, even if it was not the same thing, it helped them to understand. It helped them. And that mattered to me. That mattered to me a fair deal. So the book is not, even though we're talking about these things as being kind of life advice. And that was why I wrote the book to begin with. When I heard that having my story and whatever full weight of explaining science that I could possibly put into things, since that helped patients and that helped survivors and caregivers, then it made it more than just my story to my kids. And that was something that was important to me. I'm so glad it does help.
Absolutely. And it is wonderful. I get messages from people all over the world, right? And, just saying, hey, page 62 in your book really meant something to me. It struck a chord. And I always, when I was writing my book, it was like, if one person reads this and finds hope in the pages, then fantastic. And it has been incredible to be able to get those messages. And I'm always encouraging everybody, share your stories, because talking about it really does help. And I try to create this platform so more people can share their stories. So one of the things that really struck me in the pages of your book were the way you look at what you were doing. You didn't consider yourself a fighter, and I know I've had this discussion with a lot of people. Some of us like to think of us as, we're fighters, we're fighting this, and then other people are like, no, I'm kind of more like, just peace out, Cancer. I learned my lesson. Now you can go. That an uninvited guest that comes to dinner and never leaves. So tell me a little bit about the way you look at what you're doing as the battlefield, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'll just say how I view it. And then kind of more psychologically, how it might be helpful to view it this way, or how to think about other things. So how I view it is that there's really no evidence that being super positive about your cancer or super negative does much. There are plenty of things that require a lot of courage as a cancer patient. And you know this, and many of the listeners will know this. It takes courage to reach into that pill box and put chemotherapy in your mouth on time every day. That takes plenty of doing. There is a lot that has to be done just to do that. That's plenty of fighting. But the reality is I'm not the one doing anything more than that. I do have to focus on those things. I have to worry about trying to make sure that, life goes on, that people around me are being able to survive, that they're able to be emotionally healed. That's a fight of its own kind, and that is something to worry about. But actually fighting the cancer, actually killing the cancer, that is not my fight. I'm the battlefield of a fight. The real fight is being done by chemotherapy. That is snarling DNA and tying it up so that the cancer cells can't divide. The real fight is being done by radiation that is creating free radicals that blow holes in DNA that DNA can't survive, and therefore cells that have lots of DNA that are transcribing and making lots of copies of themselves are at risk. Cancer cells are at risk. That's the fight. My oncologists are fighting the fight. They're waging the war. They're waging the war with the weapons of war, with poison gas derivatives. They're waging they're waging war with the offshoots of nuclear weapons technology and radiation. I mean, that they are waging war in me, and I am fine with them fighting that fight. They are good at fighting that fight. They are the best we have in fighting that fight. I don't need to fight that fight. I have other things that require every bit of energy that I can muster, or especially during treatment could muster, or right after radiation. And I think, Melanie, the reason that we're kind of asked to fight the fight by people that mean well around us is because it's kind of for them to feel, I'm telling you something to do so I don't have to be there and live with the fact that you might die. They don't want to face that. I understand it. I get it. But it is really, that's something that they're doing to protect themselves. And it puts a lot on the cancer patient, or can put a lot on the cancer patient. If you died, did you lose your fight? You just weren't a fighter enough? I think that's nonsense. It really is. It isn't because you didn't fight hard enough. It isn't because you didn't care hard enough or didn't want to live. It isn't because you lost the will to live. It's because cancer is very tough. Cancer is very tough. It's part of your body, and it's a very, very tough part of your body. It's part of your body that's learned how to survive almost everything that comes at it. And it takes every bit of chemical and radiation and immunotherapy sometimes to get every last cell of something that does not want to die. That is incredibly tough. That, if left alone and put in a petri dish, can live forever. Forever. It's not an easy target at all. So if I lose my fight with cancer, I'm not losing my fight with cancer. It's not my fight. And it's just a lot to put on cancer patients. If you get a chance, it's okay to say that cancer, yeah, it sucks. It sucks. Cancer sucks. Chemotherapy, that's awful. You don't have to solve their problem for them. You can't solve their problem for them. They can't solve their problem for themselves. We can't do those things. Oncologists maybe can. Chemotherapy maybe can. The other therapies maybe can't. Maybe they can't. But it is their fight, not our fight, and we can relieve ourselves. And we can relieve cancer patients of that psychological burden of being the fighter. If it helps, do it.
I will say, for me, I'm right there with you. The fight was getting to the infusion chair and subjecting myself to that on a regular basis. The fight for me was doing the things that I needed to do to keep my mind healthy, to keep my attitude right, thinking of the future and the days that I have left. I had no idea how many days. I still don't have any ideas how many days I have left, right? But my fight is I want to make sure that I'm living every day to the fullest. Now, regardless of how many I have left, whatever number that is, we all have a finite number of days, right? So that's kind of the way I look at it, but I love the way you look at it. When somebody loses the cancer battle and the cancer takes over their body and they pass, they didn't lose. It's, can we find joy and peace through all of the storms that we go through in life? And I think that is where, if we can focus on that piece of it and let the doctors do their thing. I certainly didn't cure my cancer. I tell everybody that I didn't cure my cancer. I didn't do anything. The drugs fortunately worked. Seems to be continuing to work, knock on wood. And my job is to live to the fullest with whatever time I have left. But you talk about really finding purpose through your journey and through cancer, not despite cancer.
Without cancer, I would not have had the will or the focus to have written. No question about it. I mean, certainly wouldn't have chosen the topic, but I'm 53 years old now. So, my brain. I'm 51 years old. I feel worse. I'm 51 years old now. For the first 50 years, I didn't write a book like this. I wouldn't have written a book, certainly on the subject matter. I wouldn't have had the energy or the focus to do those things. I just would have, done another project with work. Would have raised kids another year. I wouldn't have done this thing, which I hope helps people. I mean, there is something to that, Melanie, that gives me like just the will to push things forward. I'm glad for that, because if it helps people, then it is worth it. I'm just like you, and that the exact thought that you're having, if it helps just one person, that's enough, and it is. That is enough.
Absolutely. We always talk about with our clients, purpose precedes performance. So having that purpose, and cancer was your purpose. It was your catalyst to do something that you wouldn't have done. And I interview so many other people on the show, and they all talk about the silver lining of cancer, or why it helped them make different decisions or go on different paths. And I think that there is a beauty to it. I'm not saying that it's fun, but it is quite the journey. It's very enlightening, and cancer has a way of breaking all the pieces, and then when you go to put them back together, they don't go back quite the same way. And we see things from a different vantage point, a different perspective that we've never had before, right?
That is an interesting way of putting it. I hadn't thought of it and crystallized it quite that way. That's a good both turn of phrase and a good thought that were put back together in a way that we hadn't been. That's true. That's true of me. I certainly have found it. I have. I don't know if you had this experience like after I published, like right up until I published, it was just this. I don't know what it's like to be pregnant, but just that feeling of just like, this has to come out. I have to get this out. I just let me live long enough to get through to this, or have enough energy to do this and get it out there. But once it was written and out, it was like I'd been cored out, that, something had been kind of ripped from me. It wasn't living in the same way. It was kind of out there. So I felt actually also a little bit emptier right after it. And just kind of an odd writer's observation, I guess, with something with life. I'm a religious man. I'm not just purely in science. So for those of you who are religious, I believe that part of, why God gives us hard things at times is because he likes what it does to us. Hard times sometimes just make us better people. And I've experienced that.
Yes, absolutely. I have too. And you're absolutely right. I wouldn't have written my book. I wouldn't have created this platform. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't have done if it wasn't for the silver lining of cancer. One of my colleagues, she's an amazing coach, Angie Moss, she said to me, how can you be thankful for your cancer? And at the time, there was nothing I could, you got to be kidding me. That's just craziness, right? However, she planted a seed in my head, and that's what kind of permeated. I couldn't get that out of my head. Like, how can I be thankful for cancer? And like you, it was kind of like, once I started realizing that we need to talk a little bit more about the mental side of such a diagnosis, and that was my passion. That's why I wrote. But I love that it caused you, it was a catalyst for you to do something outside of your comfort zone, something different, and you created quite the legacy.
I tried. As I said, I just tried my utmost to be able to do that. I'm sure you felt it too. Could this be the last thing you do? That changes things. It changes how you view things. It changes how I read to my daughter. I still like to read to. She could read perfectly fine, but it's fun to read to kids. But there is that sense of, is this the last time? Will I have grandkids that I read to? I don't know. I hope so. I have a decent chance, because I tried to donate my kidney. I have a chance of that happening. And as good as I feel, I mean, if how good I feel is a prognosis, then I'm fine. Which is weird. It's a weird feeling to feel as good as I do feel. I know that could be a little bit of a siren song, so I'm not statistically out of the woods. I never had symptoms before. Why should I have symptoms now? The answer is I shouldn't, until it's worse. So, and it is a hard cancer to spot. So I can't let my guard down completely, but I am kind of coming out of that a little bit. So I don't have quite that same, every blade of grass is, shining in the moonlight and is beautiful. That is fading a bit. I miss it a bit, honestly, Melanie, which is a weird thing.
Yeah, me too. It's the weirdest thing, because you're right. I even had a doctor ask me right after I was finished with all of my treatments. He said, what's it like? And I didn't understand what he was going for at first. And then it kind of, just the look in his eyes, it kind of clicked. And I was like, he's asking me what's it like to not know if I have it tomorrow. To live every moment as if it was my last. Every birthday, every day. So you're absolutely right. It does fade. And I do kind of miss that a little bit. Not a lot. A little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth it.
Yeah. And it really wakes us up. This isn't, and I love what you said. You had a piece of advice or beautiful words to your kids, and you're like, life is a long first draft. And I love that concept, actually. I don't know how long the first draft is going to be, but we're always constantly writing and rewriting and editing. It's not just, perfect right out of the gate. You've written a book, I've written a book. Writing the first draft is kind of, easy. It's going all and doing all the editing and things, but we don't have that opportunity when we're living out on a real stage. This isn't a dress rehearsal.
Yeah, and that the one of the points there for you and for me, I think I love editing and getting it just so. I do. I want it to be just right. But that is not life. Life is not that way. A book can be. Life is not. Life is, you just have more grace for others and for yourself. That there's no editing time. You just have to edit as you go.
Spot on. Spot on. And I always say to all of my clients anyway, we live at the intersection of grit and grace. Sometimes we have to grit through it whenever we can, and sometimes we just have to give ourselves some grace. And I know I had to give myself a lot of grace when I was going through my cancer journey, but psychologically, you talked about living in two worlds, and the world where you're dying and then the world where you're living. And I know all of that uncertainty. I lived through that too. That was my first question to my oncologist was, will I live to see my grandchildren? And her question to me was, well, when are they due? And I was like, there's no buns in the oven. I don't have any on the way. And she's like, oh, no, I'm sorry, you won't. And so I had less than 9 months. I knew that. But what was it like for you living in those two worlds?
So my normal life, I think a lot of people's lives, is to think maybe 5 years in the future, maybe 10. Like that's kind of like the time of how I would live. Am I looking for a job? Well, will it pay off in 5 years? Then I might consider it. Will it pay off in 1 year? Probably not. Will it pay off in 10 years? Could. But 5 years, that's about right. That's where you kind of think about things. Am I going to buy a new house? What kind of car do I get? The things you do in life, there's some time frame that you're kind of maximizing for. And suddenly I have two bizarre time frames to maximize for. One is 5 months and the other one is 50 years. Like, I don't, now everything becomes a very difficult problem. Like, how do you live? And for me, it meant I had to choose things that could get done very quickly. Kind of my favorite scientist is Michael Faraday, and he wrote his life maxim was chemo brain sucks. It sucks so badly where things that would just be there are not there. I start out and I'm used to having them there, and they're not there. It was like a 3-word phrase with work, something else, publish. Work, finish, publish. Work, finish, publish. Like, I love that with Michael Faraday, that he would say that, because it's just like get things done sort of approach to life and getting things done. That became on steroids for me. Like, if I couldn't work, finish, publish in a very short time frame with something, literally with a book, but with just about anything else, then it couldn't count. But I also had to have something that I couldn't work, finish, publish with. I don't know. Am I going to play a game of cards, play another game of chess or something like that? Like, that didn't matter for the long term. So that was like kind of also off the table. So it was work, finish, publish with certain things that mattered long term, but I could get them done short term. And that cut a lot of things off the table. I mean, I just talk about like work, which I worked through chemotherapy, worked while I was getting chemotherapy. Important client meetings, I'd go to those. Get projects done, I'd go to that. Internal meeting where everybody sits around and for an hour, I just skipped them. I could get them done, but no, there's no time for those things. And so that was it. It's just kind of a weird re-editing of my life to things that mattered long term if I got them done, but I could get them done short term.
Absolutely. So the way we look at time shifts a little bit, and we're not going to waste time on things that aren't significant for things that might seem urgent. the tyranny of the significance versus the urgency. But I actually have to very much agree. So last year I built a house, and it was felt really good because that's something that I'm going to need to be there for a while in order to get my equity into it. And so doing that, it was kind of scary, but it was also a yes, I'm planning to live for a really long time. And it kind of really felt good because I know when I was going through all of my treatments, I was not sure, and I'm like, I don't think I can plan 5 years, 10 years down the road. I need to just do everything short term. So I know you're still kind of going through, and I haven't hit my 5 year. I'm just about to hit my 5 year mark. But I know you're kind of still like 50% there. And I know every day kind of gets a little bit more cautiously optimistic, I'm guessing.
So my cancer thankfully has a weird risk profile. I like the risk profile of my cancer. Other people may hate this, but this is mine. If I survive with no metastases seen for 12 months more from here, so 18 months total after the last day of treatment, then that just reveals I've been cured, probably. Like really, really likely. Very low lifetime recurrence. I am not one of those cancer patients. I don't have the kind of cancer that every year, forever, I'm just sitting there going, is it this year that it comes back? It's curable, but it's only about 50% chance that happens. So I really do sit in this, like, if I survive one more year of clear CT scans, then that just shows what's already on the table. The card is on the table. It is black. It is red. I don't know what it is, but finally I'll be able to flip it over by then. If you know me and you hear that I'm going back for some kind of treatment, that is not good, and it is not good at all. There is no treatment that can cure me if this cancer that is anywhere remotely in development that could cure me if the cancer spreads. It means that the treatment didn't work, and it was first shot, best shot.
Yes, well, I will be continuing to hopefully keep in touch with you over the next year, 2 years, 10 years, and see those kiddos produce some grandchildren for you guys, you and Jen. And I really had to chuckle. You were talking about what chemo is like. You said, so that's what chemo is like. Not fun, but it's not a give me weed now bad. I laughed because I have a dear friend of mine. He's an ER doctor, and I was telling him I didn't even get the words out of my mouth when I was telling him my diagnosis, and he was like, "I am writing your medical card right now." I'm like, I'm not ready to go there yet. But I actually laughed at that. That was funny.
Yeah, I at least during chemo, it wasn't. It was not horrific for me. The particular kinds of chemo I have. Other people will have other chemo. Your side effects can be every bit as bad as the worst things that you've ever heard. It's just happened to be the kind of chemotherapy that I had wasn't that bad at the time. However, there is a but. The platinum kind of chemotherapies that I had, mine was oxaliplatin, they're also cisplatin, they have nerve side effects. So now until eternity, I think, I wake up in the night with foot pain. So there is at least that, I do have that reminder of my cancer year.
Yes, I actually have little tingling in my back where that, you know, so I'm reminded too, but it's nothing like it was. It's just hey, don't forget, you almost died once, like that sort of thing. That's kind of how I look at it. But uh, you also talked about ringing the bell, and I remember that so vividly. And I kind of went back and forth: should I or shouldn't I? And it was such an emotional experience. I'm not a crier. I don't typically, I don't cry a lot. Um, but the floodgates open just like they did for you. Chemo sobby is a real thing, right? And I just like you, was kind of like, just get me out of here. I don't want to do this publicly. But the emotions, weren't they intense?
They were, and just that having that nurse walk by and say, congratulations, Mr. Stewart. Yeah. And then the next person saying, congratulations, Mr. Stewart. Each one of them making it harder and harder not to cry there. Yeah. All the people clapping. Wow. Jeez. I didn't expect that. I mean, as much as I'm kind of in the field and am able to intellectualize what's going on to me and feel, okay, well, it's another risk profile. I understand this risk profile. I've seen lots of bad risk profiles. Could be worse. I've seen worse. That kind of thing. Despite all of that, just not ready for the emotions of the situation. Probably other people are more prepared than I was.
Well, you give me chills just reliving that, and I think of my own experience reliving that, and literally you just gave me some goosebumps on that one. But I hope everybody watching this gets to experience that. I don't know if they made you read a little poem whenever you rang the bell. I had to read this little poem, and at first I thought, oh, this is silly, and then I got the first line out, and it hit me, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. But I hope everybody listening gets to have that experience to ring that bell. And it can be challenging. No, chemo is not fun, like you said, but a lot of times for a lot of people, they make it out to be way worse in their mind than what it actually is. And I know for me, I didn't go through a whole lot of the side effects that I expected it to be way worse, quite honestly. So I think we have to be a little cautious about expecting the worst sometimes, right?
I think that's one of the kind of dubious joys of kind of being immersed in the field, is that I knew it could be horrible, but I knew it didn't necessarily have to be horrible. With that, I had, and that's true of cancer in general. There are plenty of cancers that have cure rates above 90%. Many lymphomas do. Most melanoma is caught early, and the lifetime recurrence risk is less than 1% if you catch it early and you cut it out. I mean, it's just it's that. But the new cancer patient doesn't know that. The new cancer patient often hears cancer and it feels like a death sentence to begin with. It might be, but it often isn't. And sometimes you have a very curable something going on. 40% of us, 4 out of 10 of us, at some point in our lifetime, will get a cancer diagnosis. And most of those won't be serious cancer diagnoses. It'll be something like melanoma, and you're able to cut it out. But I have had, and I'm sure you have had, people that have come to you that were so scared out of their minds from something that, when you look it up, you go, you have a 98% chance of being cured by what you are taking. 98%. The chances of your dying in the next 5 years are no different from a person of your age. It's just the same thing. This is not going to be fun, but it is not a death sentence, and people don't need to be quite as scared as they thought they were going to be. Even the worst things that happen aren't, even if it's really bad, it won't be that bad.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we share our stories, right? And showing people that there is hope. It's not necessarily, the sky is falling. Who knows? And I I actually met chaplain for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we were talking a little bit, and I we was talking about stats, football stats. Everybody follows football stats. And I kind of like chuckled a little bit, and I was like, you sports people, you follow all the stats and you keep all the numbers and everything, but when God's on your side, the stats don't really matter too much, right? So I have no idea why I'm still living my best encore, and I just hope that we can be a little bit a light for other people that are going through it. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems, and if we could just get back to today, in this moment, we're good. We're okay. So I hope that everybody reaches out and gets this book called Living: Inspiration from a Father with Cancer by our friend Jeff Stewart. Where can they find this book, Jeff?
Any bookstore will be able to order it in. It is in some bookstores, and Amazon, of course, will have copies of it. And the Audible should be out this quarter. So so we're talking in 2023, and before Christmas, it should be out.
Well, it's a great Christmas present for anybody. And it's also even if you don't have cancer, it's such a beautiful read. You did a fantastic job on it, Jeff. I so appreciated you coming on the show and getting to know you a little bit more. I hope we continue to stay in touch. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
For everybody else listening, tune into our next episode dropping soon, where we will talk some more about all of the emotional ramifications of that cancer diagnosis. So, see you soon.